Welcome to Succession Planning webinar presented by JCI USA. My name is Jennifer J. Ray. I am your immediate past national president. And tonight I have the honor to be able to present this webinar about a very important topic for all of our states, all of our chapters, and our organization as a whole. Succession planning, how we build a leadership pipeline for our state and our chapter. You'll notice on this front cover, this training was prepared by Brian Byers, who is a past state president of the Pennsylvania JCs, and was originally presented last March in Nashville, Tennessee during the JCI USA National Convention. Tonight we're going to talk about a number of topics. What is succession? Why it's important? What are the benefits? How do we integrate our succession planning with our strategic planning? Because if we are not operating our chapters strategically, we can have all the succession planning in the world, but we need to make sure our chapters continue to function as well. And ultimately creating your own plan, which is going to be taking the tools we talk about this evening and doing different exercises on your own. At the end, you're certainly welcome over the next week or two if you'd like to send any emails to me, and you and I can always set up time to talk beyond this webinar. So let's start with, what is succession? Succession planning is all about identifying and developing potential leaders. And you'll notice that "and" is in bold. It is not just identifying, but also making sure that we develop those potential leaders to fill the key positions in our organization. So what are the key positions? You might say it's the president, the vice president, the membership director, your chief of staff, your marketing director. It's anybody, it's a key member who helps the chapter function on a regular basis. If any of those key members suddenly departs the company, talking about our chapters, a succession plan will make sure that someone is prepared and ready to step into that role, and that they've had the previous training and relevant exposure, that they will be successful, not feel burnt out, not feel like they're being forced into a sink or swim situation, and be able to truly excel in that role. And that's why you need a long-term investment in recruitment, in training, in replacement, to ensure that your chapter continues to have leadership. You have to recruit the correct individuals, and you have to train them to replace the current leadership. So we talk about the correct individuals. Who are the correct individuals? Well, each of you know best for your chapters who is best to take on those roles. Remember, the JCs aren't always for everybody. We are an organization who caters specifically to training and betterment of individuals who want to make a positive impact on their community, and by doing so, learn to be better leaders themselves. These are the people who can be trained to replace our current leadership. You can usually find anybody to run a project. People have passions, and they want to see that passion come to fruition in projects. But the challenge is always finding the people who will lead our chapter after we're gone, who will lead our state organizations, who will lead our national and our international organization once we're gone. When you find those people, you find someone who's going to replace you, and that's when you know that you have secured your chapter success for the next decades. So let's talk about, why is it important? Succession planning isn't just important for when your top leadership leaves. In order to expand your organization to be more than what you are today, you need to have individuals ready for roles that need to be filled. Making sure that you have a developed internal talent pool ready allows you to execute the plan, your strategic plan, in order and provide you the flexibility you need to move your organization forward, to make sure that your chapter has the capability to grow, to expand, and to be even bigger and better than what you have today. It's by putting these people into higher level roles, by building new leadership roles, that we're able to ensure that our organization continues. So one example is, if you have decisions or plans that you're working on, which, if you are familiar with the Active Citizen Framework, these are projects and problems that we're addressing in our communities, looking to identify the root cause problems. It's not something that necessarily takes simply a 12-month time frame. It can go from 1 year to another year. It could be multiple years. And you need to have individuals who are on board with that board of directors who are learning the entire process, so that you know you always have a group of people who are being trained who are learning the process and who are willing to keep moving that project forward. And it's not just that at January 1 we start a brand new year with brand new leaders and we're starting all over again. We're making sure that we continue to educate as we go throughout. Another example is, think about this. If you can't be replaced, you can't move up, because who will take over the chapter? Say you want to move into a state position. Who will take over the chapter once you're gone? If there's no one there, then your chapter might not continue. And if your chapter doesn't continue, ultimately, we are members first and foremost always in this organization before we are leaders at the different levels. Have you ever turned anything down because you already had too much to do? And part of that is not always having the members who have been trained to learn how to help, who have been offered the opportunities to learn how to help. If there were 5 people in your local organization that could pick up where everyone else leaves off, then your chapter will continue to succeed. That's when you'll be able to move up the ladder of leadership, and that's when you'll also be able to ensure that projects continue regardless of whether you're still there or not. And our projects, our commitment to our community is greater than any single individual. And how about the times you felt guilty and guilted into saying yes to accomplish something because there was nobody else there? Think about those as well, and that happens when we don't offer opportunities to enough other individuals. If your internal talent pool is developed, moving up will be the norm and not the exception. And that's something that one of the other courses that is a JCI course called JCI Admin also walks through that process of why it is imperative to continue to move up and move onward and open the opportunities for others to join in. When you keep that same circle of individuals rotating through positions at the levels in your chapter board of directors or your state board of directors, you discourage any new individuals from wanting to come in and be on board. They walk away, and what ends up happening is you start losing potential new leaders. One of the other quotes that I've always loved talking about is that knowledge is power. It's something we've heard it many times in our lives. We hear knowledge is power, education is power, knowledge is power, but the real power comes from sharing that knowledge and being able to empower other individuals. And that's something that also can become a tripping point when we look at succession planning. That we think knowledge is power and we want to keep that to ourselves. But truly, when we empower others, when we share that knowledge, when we bring everybody along to teach everybody what this organization is about, what it takes to lead a project, what it takes to lead a committee, what it takes to lead a chapter, we create a stronger chapter, we become better leaders ourselves, and we open the opportunity for others to step into our role as we go on to do other things and accomplish other things in our organization. So what are the benefits of succession planning? Succession planning allows our chapters to run as well-oiled machines. If everyone is on the same page and everyone is moving towards the same goal, we can accomplish more. And that's not to say that we all have the same exact opinions, but we're all working towards that same large-scale goal. We may come about it from different perspectives. We may get there on a different path, but ultimately we're all working towards that same goal. So if one person chairs the same project year after year, and there's nobody else who's stepping up to be involved, or that person is so passionate about this project that they never want to give it up because they believe in this cause so much, and it becomes their project, it no longer becomes the chapter's project. What happens is the chapter is then on the schedule of that individual. They need to wait for when that person's ready to start the project. They need to wait for when that person's ready to call committee meetings. And that individual has all of the knowledge themselves of who are the points of contact, where are the resources, what's the timeline, what's the schedule, what's the media opportunities. It no longer is a chapter project, and it becomes part of that person. There will come a point in time when that person ages out of this organization, turns 41 and is no longer able to renew. Then that project, if it hasn't been empowered to other individuals, if we haven't granted others the opportunity, if we haven't shown a succession in our leadership of that project goes away. If that's one of our keynote projects for the chapter, our chapters struggle. This sounds like a perhaps over-the-top example, but I tell you that from traveling across this country last year, it's happened, and it continues to happen to this day at times. People become very passionate about something, one of the projects that their chapter does, and that's fantastic. Ways that you can look to ensure succession planning still happens for projects and ultimately for our chapters is to allow individuals to serve as mentors for a project, not to run it, not to be actively the ones calling out to all of the different resources, but to be the ones who can maybe sit there and always serve as a mentor so there is a continuation of knowledge. They can be the individual who reviews the project management guide, the document that helps us plan our projects. They can help and serve as an advisor for other individuals in the chapter. But it's very important that we allow others to participate and to chair projects. Succession planning also allows us for any unforeseen changes. There are many chapters where officers have to move in the middle of the year. Perhaps it's job opportunities. Perhaps they're in the military and they're stationed somewhere else. When somebody moves, and whether they're chairing a project or they're serving as an officer in the chapter, it's an unforeseen change. There could be many other unforeseen changes that happen. Succession planning and ensuring that everybody has that same knowledge base is what ensures that we're able to continue moving our chapters forward and have flexibility no matter what happens. Very important is not only how we see ourselves, but when we go out there and we represent our organization to the general public. This is important as we're trying to bring new members in, as we're trying to bring sponsors in, as we're looking to build new partnerships, as we're looking to do new projects. We need to show that our chapter, our company, so to speak, because that is what we are as a company, that we are a valid entity. If we're just a group of friends and it's the same group of friends who do the same thing year in and year out, we don't show that we are valid as an organization. We show that we're a great group of friends who have big hearts and who do good in our community, but that's all we are. Succession planning and the continuation of leadership through our organizations and finding others and teaching others to step up and be leaders themselves shows the community at large, potential partners and other stakeholders, that we are in fact an organization that is valid and an organization with vision and with foresight to want to partner with. Defining our mission is making sure that everybody knows who we are and what we do. And we as members of JCI USA have a defined mission statement already. And that is to empower young people, to provide them development opportunities, making sure that young people are the ones running the organization, that we're giving them development opportunities, and through that they're empowered to create positive change in their community. And here's the big one. I'm sure everybody on this webinar has heard it before. Why join the JCs? What's in it for me? What do I get out of it? It's harder and harder to keep the attention of our younger members. It's harder and harder to keep the attention of anybody anymore. Videos need to be 90 seconds or less. Things need to be put into a picture with as few words on it as possible. You look at the trends on social media, Instagram, Snapchat, Vine. As we continue progressing our technology, it continues to be shorter and shorter amounts of time and periods of time that we capture people's attention. When succession planning is tied with strategic planning, it lets our members know that there are goals, and it provides them what the next step is when those goals are achieved. It's not something that we have to explain continuously. It's written out and it's understood. We don't have to go back to the drawing board each time because we've developed a plan and we're running our plan. It also shows our members that we care about them and we want them to be part of the plan. What it does is it prevents us from doing the same thing year after year. That every January we throw everything out and we start all over again and we struggle to understand what's going on. A strategic plan is what allows us to do that. Having a 5-year strategic plan is also something that gives validity to our chapters and our organization. succession planning is part of that strategic planning as well. And at the same time, this provides a platform for people to ask the questions, why are we doing what we're doing? Why aren't we doing something a different way? Should we continue to do it? Do we need to go back and look at our projects and reevaluate our projects? Is our project even hitting the market that we're looking for to hit? Is there something better? Is there a better way to do it? We must be able to provide a platform for where everyone is comfortable asking the question why. And I am a huge proponent in everything we do in this organization. Always ask the question why. Why are we doing it this way? Why aren't we doing it another way? Have we looked at every possible solution there is? We can't let ourselves get bogged down in questions. We have to make sure that we still take action, but we also need to be questioning why we do certain things the way we do. And if it's the same people asking those questions, then we have to also look at that and understand, why aren't we bringing in more members? Are we always presenting the same exact message? Ultimately, succession planning provides a platform where confidence and ideas are a necessity. When confidence and ideas are a necessity, people thrive more because they know they're being listened to and they know they're a part of something bigger. And that is so critical to our organization. When you look around the country and see, why do people join an organization? Not just the JCs, but why do people join organizations at all? People join because they want to belong. They want to belong to something. What they want to belong to comes down to their personalities. Whether they want to belong to a religious group, a civic organization such as ours, a professional organization that gears only towards whatever their certain profession is. But ultimately, people want to belong. When we open the conversation up and we ask questions and we talk about what is a plan, what is a strategic plan, what are your thoughts, what do you want to do, how do you want to be a part of this, we not only show them that here's an organization that does things, but it's an organization that cares about them and that wants to hear from them and that makes individuals feel important, even if they're not yet a member. Getting their ideas and incorporating that into what we do makes them feel important. As we get more members, we have more potential for leaders. So let's talk about succession planning and the integration with strategic planning. I mentioned this a little bit already on the previous slide. So what is a 1, 3, 5-year strategic plan? It comes down to, ultimately, the statement that's on here: an organization's process of defining strategy and direction and making decisions on allocating its resources to pursue this strategy. Ultimately, what that means is that we need to understand the process. We need to know where we want to go. And this is where we get the buy-in from individuals. This is part of developing that strategic plan. Once we get buy-in from individuals, we know what we need to do within a certain period of time. When we look at where we want to go as a 5-year plan, we need to think big, and then we can break it down further from there. The strategic plan is where you determine how you're going to allocate all of the different resources you have to accomplish your goals: people, funds, advertisement, other resources. As you look at people, this is where succession planning comes back into it. If you're looking at a 5-year plan, you know that you need to have a certain number of leaders. You know that individuals need to be trained to be able to do certain elements. This is where you can start looking at and identifying who are the people in your chapter who are brand new to the chapter. What do they need to learn over the next year or two in order to hold an office position? How are you making sure they learn that? Who are the people who are currently officers today? What do they need to learn in order to move forward and upward onto state offices or national program managers? How are they going to learn that? Who's going to provide that information to them? Are you going to be bringing in outside resources to help? Do you have past members or senators who can help with that as well? This is also where we look at with our members and know who our members are. Understand the ones who are very shy, who came for they wanted to belong, so they joined our organization, but they truly only want to do certain roles. They're not comfortable in talking with others. And while we work with them to help them become more comfortable in getting outside their shell, breaking through that shell, they're not going to be the individual we identify or target to be our membership director in the following year, because we want someone in the membership director role who is outgoing and who's willing to speak to anybody. As I mentioned earlier, we talked about how succession planning isn't just about identifying, but it's also about developing potential leaders. But first things first, we need to know what are the key positions that we need to train people for, and we have to have that plan. So as we talk about succession planning integration with strategic planning, how do we tie it all together? So the first bullet point on here is identifying future leaders, understanding what's their talent. This is where the member survey comes into play. With the member survey, you know your members before you can guide them into the positions that will benefit them and the organization most. You also need to look at with your chapter's finances. If your chapter's finances are low and you haven't had a treasurer who's had any banking background for several years, it's time to go find a new treasurer. I'm going to pause here for one moment because I do see there is a question out here. And it's a question that says, what about those individuals that don't have a need or want to move up and don't want to learn? How do you help them still find a replacement even though they are comfortable with where they are? So thank you very much for that question. It came from a previous slide, and I apologize, I only saw it now. Ultimately, so somebody is comfortable in the position. They don't want to move up. They don't want to move out. They don't want to learn anything else. One of the greatest things to share with them is if they're comfortable there, they have a passion for the organization. That's why they continue to be there. And talking about the need for the organization to become stronger means that we have to have other individuals step into that position and learn that position. Otherwise, at some point, all of us, as much as I'd love to say that I stopped at the age of 28, I recognize I didn't. All of us will eventually age out of this organization, and we only hurt our chapter if we don't teach others to become in those, to fill those positions and to learn that skill set. And that's one of the key things I've used as I've worked with individuals, is to talk back about the strength of the chapter. Ultimately, we all want the JCs to be successful. If we want the JCs to be successful, we need to recognize that more than one person has to have the knowledge. So let me go back onto the slide that we're currently on here with identifying the future leaders and now developing future leaders. So with developing future leaders, what's the strategy? If you want to bring a skate park into your community, you're not going to go and talk to 40, 50, 60-year-olds. You're going to want to go and talk to the 14, 16, 18-year-olds, the people who are going to give you the advice because they use it every day. Where's going to be the best park? These are your future leaders. If there are projects that you want to do in your community that are based towards children, you need to go and talk to people who are closer to that age range, or to individuals who have children and who understand what their needs are and what the concerns are. Essentially, what you want to do is talk to who your future leaders are. If you're looking at a 5-year plan, don't talk to the people who are 35 to 40 years old. Talk to the people who are 25 to 30 years old, because they're going to be the ones who will be the future leaders of the organization. So ask them, where do you see our chapter in 5 years from today? What do you want our chapter to be in 5 years from today? What do you imagine any town JCI USA chapter could be? And those are the individuals who will be the ones making it happen. The other thing is invest in recruitment. So you need to know what your budget is. Many of our chapters, many of our states don't have a marketing line item in their budgets, but we need to be investing. We continue to say year after year, decade after decade, that we are the best kept secret in this in the country. JCs are the best kept secret, and that should never be the case. There's no need for us to be the best kept secret. But we continue to do projects where it's just us, or we go out and do a social and we don't wear JC shirts. We don't take membership brochures. We don't talk to the place that we're going to have a social at, or when we go out and do different activities. Our goal is to bring in new members. We bring in new members and we attract people by letting them know the amazing projects and programs we run. Well, we can't do that. We can't let people know if we don't ever advertise it, if we don't have somebody who's set up specifically to make sure that that information is getting out into the local media. It's not enough to post it on our own personal Facebook pages or our chapter Facebook pages, because of course we all see it across the country because we're all already members. What we need to do is make sure that we invest in areas of where people are not yet members. So even if they're not of JC age, or they're not looking and they're not the right fit for the JC organization, they still hear about us, they know what it is that we do, and they're able to share that with other people. That takes investing, and that means we need to understand how much money do we allocate to it, and do we have even a line item in our budget so that as we're looking at our overall plan for the year, we have something set aside so that we can print out those flyers, those brochures. We know who our local media contacts are. We're able to get onto the newspapers. We're able to get onto even the public stations in our area. And then replacement. What do we do when the members age out? So we've talked very briefly about a member survey. This is where a member survey and the roster is so important. Take a look at that roster. If the majority of your members are in the 35 to 40-year-old age range, you know that there needs to be an investment, definitely, in replacing those individuals. And there's nothing wrong with telling people in their final year of membership for the chapter, especially if they've had a long tenure with the chapter, that their final responsibility as a member is to replace themselves plus one more person. Because after all, our tenured members are invaluable, and simply one person to replace them isn't enough. Give them that responsibility. Tell them that that's what they need to do. But also recognize, as you're looking at replacing, if you have a chapter that's predominantly 35 to 40 years old, you're not going to go out and start recruiting 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds. That's going to seem a little strange. You're going to have to look at a long-term plan of taking the age range and going down 1 or 2 years and recruiting some new people in that age range, and then going down another few years to bring in a few more new people, et cetera, until you do have a full range across all of those ages. One of the other important things is, as you look at it, make sure that you have people who come from all walks of life, so you have diversity within your chapter as well. So let's talk about building the succession and strategic plan. Step 1 is defining the plan. So identify the fundamental attributes for your chapter. Apply your mission and your vision for the next 1, 3, and 5 years. We already know the mission and vision of the JCs. This is where you need to have the big blue sky approach to what you want to accomplish. Talk about the $1 million projects. Talk about having 100 members, even if you only have 10 members or 20 members today. Talk about having 100 chapters in your state. Talk about having 200 chapters in your state. Talk about who is your biggest competition in the community. Is it young professional groups? Is it Kiwanis? Is it Lions Club? Are there churches? Is it other 501c3 organizations? Any group that has members between the ages of 18 and 40 is our competition. Talk about who they are. Are they succeeding? What are they doing well that we can do better? What are the things that are keeping people away from them, so we also know not to do that within our organization? Have the conversation of why we continue to run the same project year after year. If you've ever had the chance to sit through an active citizen framework training or JCI Impact, either of those, they're two separate ones, one of the things that is talked about is, why do you still have the same project? If you're not solving the root cause of the problem, then you're not succeeding at your project, and you need to look at it. It's okay that sometimes we have the 85th annual Easter egg hunt, because those types of projects make us good neighbors in our community, but they're not the core of what we should be known for. We should be known for solving problems and moving on. Once that's solved, we've developed a partnership, we've handed that off to the partners to complete the project, we move on and solve another project. So have the conversation, why do we run the same project year after year, and is it okay? Have the conversation of why did people join? Why did you join? Why did your members join? Is it because of a single project you joined? Is that project still going on? What happens for all those members who joined for one project if that project goes away? These are the big scale questions to be asking to make sure that we're looking at everything. And when we develop that plan and define that plan, we have not held ourselves back by anything. We haven't held ourselves back by money, by resources, by manpower. There's absolutely nothing. The sky is absolutely the limit. So then we go into setting goals. Create the yearly steps needed to accomplish the master plan, making sure that you keep it as a broad goal so that you can allow for there to be quickly altered changes. So giving the example, if you want to travel from Baltimore, Maryland to San Francisco, California, when you take a look at a map, you start looking at, okay, if I drive from here out to there, I pass through roughly 9 states, looking at it from a 50,000-foot view. When I get closer to the trip, I'm going to figure out, all right, exactly what highways do I need to take, even if I have a GPS. Is there anything in between I want to stop at? Get even closer to the trip, then you start recognizing, all right, how many tanks of gas am I going to need? And then as you get closer, you recognize, as you're looking at this, what's the most important thing? Is it to stop at multiple locations, or am I simply trying to get from one side of the country to the other, in which case flying is the best option? So this is how you go through the different steps. You look at it large scale, and as you're bringing it down, you will start identifying what is the best way to do it. As I said early on, there's many ways to get from point A to point B, and all of us have different ideas, and there's not always just a simple right or wrong way, but sometimes based on the goals of your chapter, based on the goals you've set out, there is a better way. So I was just verifying that there were no further questions on there at the moment. So let's move into step 3, defining that path to accomplish the goals. So we talked about in step 1, big picture, the sky's the limit. Talk about bringing in $1 million. Step 2, setting your goals on a yearly basis. Now step 3 is defining that path to accomplish them. Talk about the incremental steps for each of these goals. How are you going to get there? How do the goals need to be achieved? What do you need to accomplish each goal? So if you have a 5-year goal and it's to allocate 10% of your annual budget to marketing, and you currently have nothing allocated to it, to turn around next year and say, okay, 10% of our budget is now part of marketing, you haven't prepared for that. You haven't set up fundraisers for it, and you don't necessarily have people who are trained yet in how to make sure to use the best use of that money. So your year 1 goal could say to get your marketing even into the budget and allocate 1%. Year 2 could 2%, year 3 5%, and increment that up until on the year 5 goal you've allocated 10%. And you have somebody who's specifically assigned in that position to help with that marketing budget. So part of this, to tie it back with succession planning, it's setting the large plan for your strategic plan and also identifying, as you're looking at how are you going to implement those goals, a lot of times it's also understanding what's the manpower that I'm going to need and what's the skill set that people need to have. So when I look at that, I understand where the gaps are in what I want to accomplish, how I need to get there, and how I need to have the people and the manpower to accomplish it. And then, of course, step 4, revisit the plan often. This sounds a lot like civic leadership certification as well. We set the plan in the beginning of the year. This is a strategic plan looking at a 5-year plan, not just year to year, because while we have 1 year to lead, we have our entire JC career to make an impact. So our strategic plan is saying we can accomplish more than just things set in a calendar year. we can have bigger vision. We then need to come back, identify those individual goals, look at the incremental steps, and then come back on a yearly basis and a bi-yearly basis, sometimes even on a monthly basis. Understand, are we still on the same track? Do we still have those same overarching goals? Has something changed fundamentally in the world around us, in our community, that might have an impact or a change on that goal as well? Because these goals can change all the time. Our leadership changes, our membership changes. We may start off the year with wanting to make an impact with a mental health issue, something that is very relevant in the young people across this country. But then we may partner with somebody else who is much more equipped and has already brought other individuals together, and we're partnering with them as well. So we may change our overarching goal to still partner with them to work with that organization, but then to take on another set of goals. We have to make sure our chapters and our states are always looking to keep this plan alive, to allow flexibility within it, to make sure that it can adapt. Maybe you have a member picked out for a particular position and they move. That's why you always look at is you're identifying the strategic plan and who you need to make those goals happen, which then comes into your succession planning. Don't just put everything on one person. And a lot of times in smaller chapters especially, that happens. Maybe there's only 10 to 20 people in your chapter, or even at 25 people. And you have one person identified as that person is going to be next year's chapter president, or that person is going to be on the board next year. That's where you need to start taking a look at and say, okay, for next year, we haven't been working the succession plan as much, so this individual should be next year's chapter president. These 4 individuals then have the potential to serve on the board in any of the other positions. And then I'm also looking at who else is in the chapter who we should be training next year to step up on the board in the following year. Make sure that we don't ever put one person and put everything on one person, because then that person can feel overwhelmed and burnt out very easily. So identify multiple individuals. So reviewing again, we define the plan, we set the goals, we define how we're going to accomplish those goals, and then we revisit that plan often. And all through this process, we're always looking at not just the goals of our chapter, but the people who are going to be there to help us accomplish them. And we don't hold ourselves back by the fact that we may not have those people in the chapter today. We then have to look at how do we incorporate the marketing budget, how do we incorporate going out and advertising, how do we look to bring in new people specifically for something that they can then train and teach others. Treasurer is a great position as well, because often we don't have people who want to take that role on. We can then identify someone in the community to come in, help us with that role, having checks and balance in place as we are looking at the finances of our chapter, and then have that individual train others as well. So this training actually has included in it a group session that you can do as a breakout. I left this in here because this is the activity I think is important for each of you to take a look at. Before you start putting this into immediate action for your chapter, start running through this to yourself. For your board of directors, think about a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, and a 5-year plan. Start thinking through the members who are in your chapter. If you are a chapter president or somebody who has access to the entire chapter roster, go into the membership database and pull that up and start using that to identify, do you have people who will be on your board of directors in next year? Do you have people for the next 3 years? Do you have people for the next 5 years? If you're looking at it 3 years out and you don't see enough folks, then you should know that one of your immediate action items is to start identifying projects that are going to attract new members into the chapter to build that leadership base for 3 years out, and then start looking at 5 years out. Identify also why you think they would be a good member of the board of directors. Now, if you're on this webinar tonight and you're not a member of your chapter board of directors, or you don't have access to the membership database to see the whole chapter, talk to your chapter president or your state president, and they'll be able to pull a roster for you of your chapter. On the individual basis, decide what is it you're going to be offering your members and why is that important. Same thing with the community. What are you going to offer them? Why is that important? Why does that make you relevant in your community? And that's a very key word, and I saved it for the last slide, but relevance. It always comes back to, are you relevant in your community, and what makes you different than all those other chapters and organizations that we looked at and identified as our competition earlier on? What are you going to do that makes you important? The Active Citizen Framework is one of the keys to answering that question. As you meet with your government officials, as you talk with local leaders, not necessarily just those in government, but those who are key community leaders, as you ask them, what are the major issues you see, and then start identifying how your chapter can be the ones to solve them. From the business side, what are you going to do to market and support your chapter? Why are you going to do that? What are the audiences you want to seek out? Where are they located? It doesn't help to advertise in the local newspaper if the demographics of where that newspaper is distributed, if it's a free paper and it's only ever put into areas that attract predominantly people who are not in our age range. I offer that as actually a real-life example. My home chapter has a local paper that is free, and it's put out, it's distributed, but it's distributed in areas that are predominantly 55 and older. So we learned years ago to not use that local paper. Still put things in there to promote what we've done and our accomplishments, but that's not going to be the area we put something in to try to get new members out of it. That's just the area we advertise to let people know that we've accomplished something, so the name recognition is there. From the international side, there are so many opportunities within JCI and even JCI USA, our national programs and our international programs. And it can be overwhelming if you're looking to do everything. So look at the ones that resonate within your community. I've heard many times over that Nothing But Nests as a program doesn't necessarily resonate within our community. An important factor of why we continue to promote that, outside of just simply the elimination of malaria as a critical global funding impact, it's also the fact that it's a bipartisan issue that nobody is overly upset about. So it's an easy way to get our foot in the door and talk to our legislators about something that we're partnered on, but also then to be able to talk about the JCs as a whole. But maybe that's something that you want to look at something else instead. There's the UNICEF End Human Trafficking, a program that impacts every single state in the U.S. But there's other international programs and there's other national programs. Adopt a School, Leukemia Lymphoma Society. There's several other programs. Take a look at them, see what resonates, and why do you want to run those projects. And then ultimately, as you look at the chapter and how they operate, what processes are needed to implement? What do you already have in place? What do you need to even develop to make sure you keep the plan moving forward for the 1, 3, and 5 years? Some of the examples, and we have so many processes already, and that's why it's important as you look at this to be very honest about where's your chapter at and what are the needs your chapter has. JCs as an organization have been around for over 100 years. So in those 100 years, we have obviously developed many, many resources, and we have many things available to us. So as you're looking at what processes you have or might need to have, think about things such as the annual report, looking at the membership surveys, looking at a community survey, updating your succession plan, having new member packets put together, and making sure that all this information is housed in a place that is easy to pass on and easy for members to have access to. There are some chapters that have a thumb drive. There's some that do a Google Drive. There's some that put it on a member's area on a website. But the key is to not just use it for 1 year and not pass things along, making sure that that more or less standard operating procedures is passed from year to year. And that's going to be what helps ensure that the vision you've set forward and the plan you've developed for a 5-year plan and breaking it down into the 1, 2, 3, 4-year implementation pieces, how that continues to be used year after year, and most importantly, how you use it to look at succession planning. Now, I'm sure for many of you, when you got on this call tonight, on this webinar, you were looking at simply the answer of, how do I figure out who's going to hold office next year? Or how do I figure out who's going to hold office the year after that? And I'm hoping that you're taking away from this, succession planning is one component, but in order to be able to identify those leaders year after year, you need to identify the plan for your chapter and for your states on a much larger scale. When you identify that larger scale plan, that's when you really identify what gaps exist, and you can start gradually filling those gaps in. As you fill those gaps in with members and with training, with opportunity, that's when your succession plan truly takes place. So we've talked truly about the different tools. Where do we start? Simply, you could start any day. You could start tomorrow. If you have already done a chapter plan, use that as a starting point. But at any time, sit down and talk about what is going to be that 5-year plan. When are you going to set time aside to do that? Because if you don't have that larger vision, as I've already mentioned, without that larger vision, you're starting over every single year. And when you start over every single year, it's hard to build a succession plan because you don't remember, or you don't know, or you have not yet documented where the gaps are, who needs what training, who has what desires, and what do they want to learn. And how we stay on target is that we keep revisiting this on a regular basis. We revisit it quarterly as we're looking at our review of the plan of action, and then we revisit as we review that plan of action, we then identify how does that fit back into the strategic plan, and with that strategic plan, where are gaps for our succession plan. So that does wrap up the presentation materials. I will leave it open for anybody who would like to put questions in. So I'll pause here so folks can type any questions they may have and I can answer them. I'm not seeing any further ones come through. So I want to thank all of you for joining this evening. I truly hope that what you're walking away from this webinar with is the basic steps on how to build that strong strategic plan for your chapter. The recognition that that strategic plan is what gives your chapter and your state validity, and as you're going out talking to future stakeholders, to say that you have a vision moving forward beyond just the organizational mission and vision. You have action steps for your chapter, and with that you then identify who is in your chapter and who do you need to have in your chapter. Where can you target those individuals to join? And with the members you currently have, what skill sets do they still need in order to fill the next positions? If you have any bylaws that talk about what minimum requirements are for your chapter president, start identifying. Sometimes that's years of service, or it can be holding a position on the board for 1 or 2 years prior to being a chapter president. If those bylaws exist, start identifying who has already held a position, who's eligible to be that chapter president, and how do you make sure that more individuals have the eligibility, so you're not finding yourself in a situation that you have a gap in your leadership. So I do not see any other individuals. Oh, hold on. Without member surveys, this is another question that came up. Without member surveys, how do we identify future officers? And you are correct. Without a member survey, that's a very challenging thing to do. So my recommendation is to develop that member survey. Ask people, and it doesn't have to be something broad-based. It can be very simple. Ask people when they joined, or why they actually, you know when they joined from the roster and the database, but why did they join? What are their goals? What do they want to accomplish? And what leadership roles they have ambitions to hold. It could be something as simple as that. It's also something that to go out and ask other chapters in your state or to contact me if you want other ideas for member surveys. Also look online in the JCI USA online library. There are different surveys in there. It's never too late to put surveys out there for your members and to identify what it is that they want to do. The other thing is, don't forget, as you have new members coming on board, part of that new member packet should be a member survey, or to just update your member surveys on a quarterly basis or twice a year, not just doing it in the beginning of the year. Because even within that survey, things change for people as they have life changes, marriages, divorces, births, sometimes moving, sometimes promotions at work. They could be looking for a house where they weren't originally doing that in the beginning of the year. They have different things come up which might change some of the answers in that survey. So my recommendation is to go ahead and survey those individuals. Obviously, as we're halfway through 2016 and looking towards leadership for 2017, rather than necessarily surveying for next year's to identify people to serve in office for 2017, just start looking at who has been around, and as you've gotten to know the members, what are their skill sets? So you can identify the immediate needs for a 2017 Board of Directors, and then between now and the very beginning of 2017, get that survey out there for your members to participate in. All right, that was the final question. The one thing I do not have in here is my contact information, so anybody who has pens around, what you can do is just simply write it down. It's J-R-A-Y, my first initial and my last name, so jray at usjcees.org, and that is spelled out usjaycees.org. And I'll be happy to answer additional questions, as well as if you have a strategic plan and you want somebody to take a look at it, then you can certainly pass that along to me, or any other questions that you may have. And it does look like another question has come in. How far is it acceptable to swap position in a year? Like if a person was active for half the year and then they can't take another position that was given, or hold on, I'm sorry, was active for half the year, and then can the position be given to someone else? This is a very challenging question, and I thank you for asking that. We are volunteers. We are not a volunteer organization. We are a civic organization of leaders, but we volunteer our time. Once you take and step up into becoming an officer, you cease simply being a volunteer, and you have commitments and responsibilities that you have to do. You are bonded. You are an officer of if you're a chapter, a community-wide not-for-profit organization. If you're a state officer, you are an officer of a statewide not-for-profit business. And we are an IRS entity. All of us are, with our chapters and our states and our national organization. Sometimes people take something on and they don't always know how to get out of it either. If you have ever been in a leadership position in your employment where you're in a hiring or firing position, you know that there's certain steps to take, and if you haven't been in that position, I would encourage you, it's the same steps we would have with our local officers. Work with them to identify what's going on. Sometimes it's short term, sometimes it's something very simple, medical, it's something that you can work around. If it's a short-term lapse, they did a great job in the first half of the year, maybe this last month they've disappeared. Talk to them. Make sure you find out what it is and start setting some of the parameters. I need you to do X, Y, Z. Otherwise, I will need to ask somebody else to step in for that position. And similar as in a regular employment position, document it so that both of you come to the same agreement, because we all communicate differently, so we need to make sure that all of us are on that same page. I would say the very first step is just talking with that person to make sure that they understand something has changed and that you have noticed it, and to make sure that they're okay. Because first and foremost, we're all members together, and we truly are a JC family. So find out that they are okay. Is there something going on that maybe no one's aware of? Is it just a short-term thing that someone can step in and help out for the short term? If it's longer term, then offer the opportunity to step down and have somebody else fill that position. But the short answer is yes, it is possible to replace people midway through a year. But remember, in so doing, if it's not handled properly, you can alienate not only that person, but any potential friends or future members that they have as well. So handle it as if they were your employee. Talk with them, document things, set a plan of action, move forward with that plan of action, and set an understanding of what the potential repercussions would be should the plan not be addressed. All right, that is the final question that I am seeing in here. As I mentioned before, please feel free to reach out to me at jray@usjcs.org. I do hope everybody enjoyed the webinar tonight. It has been recorded and will be available for future listening. Both this succession planning PowerPoint as well as many of the notes that went with this is also available in our online library, so you have access to it as well. Have a fantastic night, and I look forward to hearing all of the success stories with your strategic plans and your succession plans for the remainder of 2016 and for the next many years to come. Thank you all, and have a good night.